What's up YouTube? So in this video we are continuing the rendering series. Now the point where we're at on the job is we will be looking at scratch coating this wall here. Now this was slurry coated towards the end of the day yesterday, which is why it looks a little bit rough, and we did run out towards right at the end. So what we're going to do is we're just going to use a bit of SBR on that new brickwork there just before we start putting the scratch coat on. But yeah, this is the wall we're going to be doing. We're actually going to be hitting the side of the house today. So it'll be Louis, myself, and another plasterer, Luke, who will be hitting this today. So it is personal preference as to whether you want to run mesh or not. Some of the walls, certainly the back of the house, we decided to mesh them. On the side here, we're not going to. Just also as an FYI as well, we did have a problem with the sand. It's actually the reason why we didn't record the scratch coat on the back, which is actually what our preference was. It's not the first time we've had sand from a particular merchant where it's like the sand is too fine. It's almost like it's kiln dried sand. It isn't, but it is a bit like that, where it's exceptionally fine. And what happens is that the water can't stay in the render, and it actually comes to the surface and makes the cement go off really quickly. It also can't hold its weight on the wall, and it actually falls off. They say it's a couple of times this season we've had bad sand, so we actually had to bin 3 tons of sand and go to another merchant and order new sand, which is why unfortunately we've left it to the side of the house before we start showing you how to do the scratch coat. So we do apologise for that. For those that wanted to see us putting that on, the first day was an absolute headache. It was a nightmare. But what we're going to do is we're going to do 2 double gauges up here on the scaffold, and then we're going to do 2 double gauges down below. I'm going to be putting on the top section, and Louis and Luke will be putting on the bottom section. But what we'll do is we'll show you the process of us putting it on. Okay, so when it comes to applying the scratch coat, generally what we do is just use a couple of bucket trowels worth of sand and cement on the hook and trowel, and you just want to work the sand and cement just a little bit before you apply it to the wall, just to take some of the air out of it. Now we've already done the section there, that side of the gutter, so what we're going to do is we're going to apply this section here. Now with sand and cement, it's usually best to start at the top and then work down, so you're constantly building up and up and up. And also, as a general rule, if you're right-handed, you want to work right to left. Left-handed, you want to work left to right. The idea being that you're constantly building on what you've already put on. I'm going to be totally honest with you, there isn't an awful lot in it, but if you do it that way, at least it looks like you know what you're doing. So we'll be working right to left. The only exception to this rule is if you are working to a bead. So if the bead is on the left-hand side, you would go to the bead first and then you work across. The reality is you only go right to left because the idea is it's a bit faster. But the most important thing is to make sure that the thickness is set correctly. Now we do have a bead on that far right-hand side, and we've roughly got the thickness down by the drain pipe. So we will start on that right side. But what we're going to do is we're going to start about a foot down from the soffit here. And all we're going to do is we're just going to go straight up. When you first start, you want to just go nice and slow. And you want a reasonable amount of pressure in putting the render on. So now what we'll do is I like to come about 1 metre or so across. I might just flash all the way to this bead, so all the way across and then down about 1 metre or so, and then rule this off. Now there are a couple of things which are specific to this job. I do apologise for the background noise. Last time it was crows that were heckling us, now it's seagulls today. I do apologise. But because this is a hack off, the brickwork isn't particularly flat. So what you'll find is that at times the render can be something like 20 or 30 mil thick just on the scratch because of how deep these holes are. You can see some here, these are very, very thick holes. So what you actually can find sometimes is that the render is just too heavy to stay on the wall. And it can actually rip itself off. So what you find with something like this is you actually have to rule this off a little bit earlier than you would blockwork or brickwork. So what we're going to do is just put that on and rule it off. Now what you'll probably find is it won't rule very well, it'll tear it off, and what you're looking to try and do is just take out a lot of the high spots, and then you'll carry on, and then just when it's pulled in a bit, go back over the top of it. Now you can clearly see the sun is hitting this wall, so it shouldn't take very long. What we find is a wall like this where it's really uneven and there's quite big lumps in it or dips in it, that we have to rule this 3 or 4 times to get it absolutely spot on. So it is a bit of a case of being patient with it, but it is worth it at the end. But what we're going to do is we're just going to flash this section on, and then we'll look at the process of ruling it off. So same as before, we're going to start from the top, and all we're doing is just going to go straight up and then just wipe it slightly to the side on where we've already been. Like that, and then up. Once you've done a reasonable amount, it's worth just going slightly to the side like that, just to bed it in a bit. But we're just going to apply a decent section, and then we will look at them. Make sure you have your fork underneath the wall, underneath the trowel, so you try and catch as much of the render falling as possible, especially as Luke and Louie are working directly below me. When it comes to going directly up against the soffit, the easiest way I find is if you use the nose of the trowel and then just flick it straight into the soffit like so. Takes a little bit of practice not to hit the trowel against the soffit. Comes to going up against the bead, what you want to do is just really push it in nice and tight initially, just to try and fill out those holes. So just try and do an initial fill. And then straight up. Okay, so now that section there is done where we need to hop up, what we're going to do is just do a reasonable section, maybe to about halfway down. We'll hit that and then we'll go over it with the rule. The eagle-eyed viewers may again be wondering, is this the giveaway trowel? Yes it is! How do you know it's the giveaway trowel? Well, because it's the only trowel that we use that has a cork handle. I love Nella trowels, but I have these are horrible handles. I really don't like them, they're so uncomfortable. Appreciate some plasterers absolutely love them, but me and Louie, we are wooden handles through and through, I'm afraid. Whoever wins the trowel, let me know if you want me to put a timber handle on it for you, or whether you want to keep it as the cork one. I don't particularly like them. Anyway, we've done a section here. We're asking an awful lot of the render. We've put it on pretty darn thick. As we've mentioned, the brickwork is very uneven. In some places up to like 30 mil thick, which is way too thick for render on a first coat. So we're going to rule this off. Do not be surprised if it tears. There's a good chance it will tear when we're doing it now. That is okay. We are expecting it. It's still very, very wet. But unfortunately, it's a necessary process for us to go through to get a decent finish. So we're going to rule it off now. Now, the general rule of thumb when it comes to ruling off is to use as long a level or ruler or straight edge. So we're going to use a feather edge. I think Blaine Gray from Plastering for Guinness, he's gone into great detail about these tools. These are fantastic. I think this is one from Rafina. The general rule is you want to try and use the largest straight edge you can for the area you're working in. That said, the longer the straight edge, the harder it is to use. Now we generally have a 1200, which is what this one is, and we have a 2 meter one as well. This is obviously less than 2 meters into the gutter, so we are going to use this one. But generally what we do use is we start with the small one, just to take off the initial bit of render, and then we go on to use the bigger one after that, just to help really get large areas nice and flat. But let's look at the process of using this. Now, when it comes to using this, it is very much, in my opinion, what feels right. But generally I prefer to have it this way, so the feathered edge part pointing down, and then pretty much around 90 degrees, or just under 90 degrees, and I prefer to use a slight angle and a slicing motion. Certainly on your first rule off, that nice slicing motion, because if you go straight up, especially with it here, how thick the render is, it runs the risk of just ripping it clean off. So it's a nice light pressure. Again, slight angle, and just a nice swooping motion just works best for me, like so. And this is, the idea is that this is just taking off the initial high spots. Once you've done it a few times, then you can go straight up, like so. You can see straight away, going straight up, it's wanting to rip out this thick section here. It's really struggling. And then same again with the vertical, just going nice and light. Again, I prefer to do a slight angle. If you go dead straight down, what you'll find is as you're pulling it, it'll just drop it on the floor. So at a slight angle like so, a nice gentle ruler. Okay, so if we were to have a look at the first rule, you can see straight away it looks very, very rough here. Now this sort of thing shouldn't alarm you at all. It's like this because it is so wet. Same here, we've had to push it back in. Again, because the render is on so thick, same here. Now you could do an initial scratch, certainly an option. So what an initial scratch is where you do a very thin scratch coat just to take out a lot of the defects and then go straight over it again. It is an option. It's not what we're going to do here. I'm pretty confident that we can get a decent finish on one single scratch. Just as a general rule of thumb, when it comes to a scratch coat, you are looking to get the wall 70% flat, if not more, on the scratch coat, and then the top coat you're looking to get another 25 to sort of 27% on the top coat, getting it flat, which means really the hand floating is only getting another probably 3% flat, if that. The floating and the sponging, they do not get the wall nice and flat. It is in the scratch and the top coat, but most of the job is done with that scratch coat, not in the top coat. Now the thought might be, right, okay, so we've done an initial rule. I've heard that I then now need to go over this straight away. Not with walls like this. You need to leave it a bit, leave it 10-15 minutes, just let that pick up a bit, then go over it again. The reason being is if you were to apply the render straight on top of that, because it's still wet and because it's thick, it will just want to pull itself off. So just We've ruled it flat a bit, just leave it for 5-10 minutes, let it dry a bit, and then go over the top of it. So what we're going to do is we're actually going to do a bit more of this lower section, try and match up with Louis and Luke down below, and then we'll come back over it again, fill it out again, then we'll rule it again, and then see where we're at after that. And then you'll see very quickly, after we've done this process 2 or 3 times, that's when you're starting to get those perfectly flat finishes. So what we're going to do is we're going to come back once I've hit this section, and then we'll look at ruling the wall for a second time. Okay, so the final part of the process when it comes to doing the scratch coat, so this here has been ruled off, it's been allowed to pull in. You can see that even though the sun is beating down on it pretty hard, there's still a little bit of movement in there, but it is for the most part firmed up nicely. The reality is there isn't really a bad time to do the scratch coat. Obviously you don't want it where it's gone completely rock hard, where you can see the far end where the sun's been beating on it at the start of the day. It's obviously gone pale where it's dried out. But for the most part, you can scratch it almost pretty much immediately, or you can leave it for half an hour to an hour, if not longer, which generally tends to be on my preference. I don't particularly like scratching when it's very wet, because the scratch marks tend to be really deep. Just makes it a bit of a pain because you have to fill that in later on. But generally, when you're looking for a good scratch, you want to try and get to about 1 millimeter to 2 millimeters into the surface. And again, my preference is to use wavy lines. You do hear an awful lot of plasterers and renderers that say because render shrinks in all directions, the waves make a difference. I don't know. I've seen decent renderers that use a straight scratch, it looks fine, and then other renderers that use wavy, and then you get others that use figure of 8. So at the end of the day, in my opinion, whatever works best for you. But just remember to use a decent quality scratcher. My personal preference, I think these ones are the best. I do apologise for the wind if it's coming through on the microphone. These are quite cheap. These are about £7-8 on Amazon. I think Draper make them. Any unbranded one is fine. They do one with a wide tooth on it. I don't personally like those. We have used them. I just think these are better. They give a better key. But yeah, just before it's gone completely off, just do a nice, decent, even scratch all the way across. Right, and that is it. It's been certainly
an interesting job. You can see the section we started right at the beginning of the day, where it's been hitting the sun so much it is pretty much bone dry. You could probably render straight over the top of that, but for the most part, if we were to have a look, for the most part it looks pretty good. A bit further along. Certainly good enough, I would have thought, to lose on the top coat. So that really is it. As we mentioned before, when it comes to doing the scratch coat, the key with it really is to remember that you're looking to try and get the wall 70% flat across the entire wall. So get it as good as you can at this stage. Now these walls, we knew they were terrible. We said in the introductory video these walls aren't brilliant, so we've had to use an awful lot of render. Could it have done with a pre-scratch? Yeah, probably. Pre-scratches are not great in my opinion for 15mm beads. Really, you need to be using something like a 5 or a 10mm bead. Again, it's not something we generally do. For the most part, I think we've got it within that 70% window where we can probably lose the remainder of the deviation in the top coat, of which you'll see we'll be rendering that tomorrow. So you'll see that process tomorrow, and probably we'll go into a little bit more detail with regards to the technique for ruling. But that really is it. It's not really much to it. The top coat will follow a very similar process, although obviously it won't have that scratch coat. So we hope that you found this video helpful. If you've got any questions, please feel free to write them in the comment section below. But we hope you found it helpful. Consider giving it a thumbs up and subscribing if you enjoy the content, and we look forward to seeing you on the next one. Thanks again.